I thought last year, when I finally got my hands on The Last Temptation of Christ, that I had finally accomplished watching all of the movies from my favorite director, Martin Scorsese. It was a monumental moment for me, and that film was polarizing, to say the least. Fast forward a year, quarantine has happened, but more importantly, Tiger King happened. And Tiger King led to the news that Nicolas Cage would be starring as the Tiger King in a future film. This is relevant because otherwise I probably would never have felt compelled to glance at Cage's filmography, which is where I saw this. What the fuck? I thought I was hallucinating. Where had this Scorsese film been? How had I missed this? Why has no one ever talked about this film? In a frantic search, I discovered two things. One, it's from the same team as Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, which just happens to be my all-time favorite film. Working with Scorsese, there's writer Paul Schrader and editor Thelma Schoonmaker, which was really exciting news. And two, Roger Ebert gave it a perfect 4-star rating, which meant that I was not actually hallucinating. And of course, I had to watch this film, and here we are now. This video is a natural byproduct of my excitement and sheer dumbfounded brain. Because if I didn't know about this film, chances are you may never have heard of it either. And listen, this movie is wild.
This is X-ray, level 1 emergency. Level 1 emergency. I need units. We got fires.
Take it easy.
Faith, Drugs, and Demons. Bringing Out the Dead is based on a novel by Joe Connolly, who was once a New York City paramedic, and the screenplay was adapted by Paul Schrader, who also grew up in New York City.
It was the neighborhood I grew up in, and where I'd worked most as a paramedic, and it held more ghosts per square foot than any other.
This movie is unlike any other Scorsese film, considering that this is an entirely new subject matter for the seasoned director, though I did notice hints of Taxi Driver in Schrader's script, which I see as being natural and not imitation. In Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle wanted to help people who didn't want to be helped. He was a cowboy in a concrete jungle. In Bringing Out the Dead, Frank, played by Nicolas Cage, is consistently surrounded by people who need help, but he typically has no way of helping them. That's just how it was as a paramedic in New York City during the early 90s. And throughout the film, we get brief but powerful moments with some of the people who work alongside Frank.
I mean, correct me if I am wrong here, if I'm mistaken. Did we sell you the cocaine? Did we push it up your nose?
Oh, come on.
One of the first things we learn about Frank is that he's seeing ghosts. Frank is haunted by the people he didn't save, specifically a young girl named Rose. Rose is Frank's version of Travis Bickle's Iris, except Frank failed to save Rose, and the film begins long after this incident, so that this ghost haunting him is just another part of the job. Imagine being a paramedic in New York City. If you've never been there, maybe that's tough. But Scorsese, who's been painting portraits of his home state since the early 70s, makes it abundantly clear that this is one of the hardest, most stressful jobs ever. And he doesn't hold back on the energy. The emotion bursting from every scene is quite overwhelming, the same way the anxiety attack scene in Goodfellas was overwhelming. It's a lot to take in. And Frank walks through the madness almost unaffected, as if he's also a ghost. This isn't to say that Frank's character is emotionally stable, because he's absolutely not. And through the course of the 3 days in this film, we watch as Frank completely falls apart.
You hearing them voices again?
I just need a drink.
What them voices saying to you?
They say, kill Marcus, okay?
That ain't funny, Frank.
Look, I don't...
Bringing Out the Dead portrays working as a paramedic as a drug. To Frank, as well as Marcus, another paramedic I'll talk more about later, saving someone's life is the best thing ever. It's why they keep doing the job. And like a junkie, Frank is always trying to quit. He shows up to work late every day in hopes that he'll get fired. He drinks on the shift, purposefully avoids taking calls on the job, but he keeps coming back. At first, this bothered me. I was frustrated that, after getting in a life-threatening accident and proclaiming, I quit.
I quit! I'm through! Oh, you think just because you quit,
Them ghosts gonna quit too?
He just came back the next shift as if nothing terrible happened. But as I thought about this movie more, I realized how important that was to the story. You see, drugs are a huge part of this film. From overdoses to more overdoses to Frank's drug experience at the Oasis, which is a fucking great scene, like one of Scorsese's best. Frank's addiction isn't pills or alcohol, it's the job. And that's when I realized that not only Frank, but Marcus and the other paramedics Frank works with throughout the film, all of them have an addiction. I want to take a quick moment to shout out my Patreon members. These awesome people have been continually supporting me, enabling me to make better quality videos, and I would love it if you took a moment to check out our community. The first day in this film, and the first shift we get to watch Frank work, is with Larry, played by John Goodman. Larry really spends all shift looking forward to his next meal. He spends the whole night talking about beef lo mein.
Beef lo mein. Been on my mind since I woke.
Until realizing that he ate it last night and then decides fried chicken is the move.
Oh no! What? I just remembered I'm so stupid. I had beef lo mein last night. I can't eat the same thing 2 nights in a row.
To Larry, being a paramedic is just a means to an end. It's simply a job, and he decompresses in chicken grease and coffee. The first shift is relatively peaceful compared to the next 2 days, but it's important to understand that Frank is only holding on to sanity by threads, like a tooth, dangling, ready to be pulled. Frank is one more tug from losing it. This is important because the film is from his perspective, and not everything he sees can be trusted. So the same goes for the audience. The second day, Frank works with Marcus, played by Ving Rhames, and who's my favorite side character. Marcus is generally a positive guy because generally he's drunk. Marcus likes getting drunk on the job and looking at hookers. But he's also a believer in Christ, and I think most connected to Frank. Frank doesn't ever talk about God, but it's clear from his mental state and the general acceptance of the ghost following him that he believes in an afterlife. Frank is spiritual, but not in the same sense as Marcus, who joins hands with heroin users to lift up their ODing friend, whose name is I Be Banging,
Bring back, I be banging, Lord.
to the Lord Jesus Christ in hope of mercy. But Marcus is a drunk, despite being generally positive, and thanks to his drinking, this happens. This is the end of a terrible night for Frank, who's letting the ghosts get out of control, interfering with his work. I must note that Frank was a great paramedic, who's simply burning out. He's begun smoking, drinking, using drugs in the back of the ambulance just to silence the voices. Since Marcus is also spiritual, he senses Frank's tension and even confronts him about it. He's the only other paramedic who really tries to give Frank some help with these ghosts.
You think just because you quit, them ghosts gonna quit too? It don't work that way, Frank. I've been there, son.
Frank, what the hell are you doing back there?
I'm sick, Tom. I need a cure.
The third day, Frank works with Tom, who is a character you'd like to believe isn't based on a real person. Tom rather cause accidents than arrive at them. He's a complete nut, and I believe he single-handedly invented paramedic brutality. He's the only other person less stable than Frank, and the two of them together out on the New York City streets is not a good thing. Nicolas Cage is an acting legend.
Hey, Frank. Frank, where are you going? You're making a mistake. Yeah, you go. Okay, that's good. You go.
I need to admit that I haven't seen all of Nicolas Cage's films. More specific, I haven't seen the film he won an Oscar for, Leaving Las Vegas. But I've heard it's the reason why he's taken so seriously, despite being a generally goofy-looking dude who's made some wild character choices.
Ronaldo Hayes, he got tossed the ball and he was running with it. He was running. He jumped over 3 linebackers in midair. He sprouted antlers like a gazelle. He landed again, he ran. He scored a touchdown.
I think it's also important to understand that Nicolas Cage won that Oscar in 1996, and this movie released in 1999. Scorsese chose an Oscar-winning celebrity, but the real reason he picked Cage is because this dude can really act.
Take me back. Put me to bed. I surrender. We've done enough damage tonight.
You take things way too seriously, Frank.
Frank is as quiet as a ghost one moment, and the next moment he's screaming for no fucking reason. The highs and lows of this character are insane, and Cage has a profound ability to make that switch from dead inside to absolutely bonkers.
For fucking backup, I swear!
Watching Frank's ghost catch up with him, watching him fall apart while still trying to save people's lives, is an emotional roller coaster. It really makes you think about the struggle of being a paramedic. Roger Ebert called it the antidote to overviolence in Fight Club, which released the same year. Because while Fight Club made fighting fun, Bringing Out the Dead shows the complete opposite perspective. It shows the men and women who are left with the victims, and their struggle as emotional beings. I'll admit, it's not as much fun as Fight Club, and I do love that movie, but Bringing Out the Dead is a special film and still an important experience in 2020. Thanks to all the people who worked on it, thanks to Joe Connolly for sharing his stories, and thanks especially to Nicolas Cage for bringing this complex character to life. Much like Taxi Driver was a character study of Travis Bickle, Bringing Out the Dead is a character study of Frank. The film doesn't necessarily have a plot. The 3 days all blend together, it's hard to tell when they stop and start, and this is a meaningful decision, made in effort to portray the life of a paramedic as closely as possible. Their shifts never really end. The nights blur together. It's all a part of the job. I purposefully avoided speaking about Mary because I want you to go watch this film. Next to Frank, she's the most important character. Mary and Frank form a relationship, but not a romantic one. And this is another important layer in the film. And while it's hard to spoil a film with no real plot, I wanted to leave something big untouched, so you have to go watch the film. Because that's the purpose of this video. I wanted to promote this hidden masterpiece. It was fun to lightly analyze this film as well, and it made me appreciate it way more than I first did after viewing it. Plus, I'm already planning another rewatch. And just maybe I'll deep dive into this film in a What I Learned video. But only time will tell. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to check out my Patreon, subscribe, like, and share.